Nepal, the late 18th century. Two expanding powers grew steadily towards each other along the edge of the Himalayas. To the south, the British East India Company had conquered Bengal, subdued Awadh, and extended its influence deep into northern India. To the north, a small but fiercely determined mountain kingdom, the Gurkha state, rapidly unifying the hill principalities of what would become modern Nepal. Neither side planned war, but neither side would yield ground, and by 1814, a collision was inevitable. Nepal's expansion began under Prithvi Narayan Shah, whose ambition was nothing less than the unification of the Himalayan foothills. By the late 1700s, the Gurkha kingdom was no longer a small hill power fighting for survival. From its rugged strongholds, its armies surged outward with relentless purpose. The fertile and wealthy Kathmandu Valley fell under Gurkha control, followed by the steady absorption of dozens of smaller principalities that dotted the hill plains. Further westward, Gurkha forces crossed rivers and ridgelines into Kumaon and the Garhwal region, bringing distant territories under their banner. And to the east, they pressed towards Sikkim, securing vital mountain passes and trade routes that threaded through the Himalayas. With each campaign, the kingdom tightened its grip on the overall region, transforming conquest into a growing empire carved from stone, steel, and ambition. This expansion rested on the discipline of the Gurkha soldiers, men hardened by terrain, scarcity, and a culture that valued courage above all else. By the early 19th century, Nepal controlled a long arc of the Himalayas stretching nearly 1,000 kilometers, and to British eyes, the rise of the mountain power was impossible to ignore. As Nepal expanded from the mountains, the British expanded from the plains. And after securing their dominance in Bengal and Awadh, they shifted their gaze northward. Commerce and conquest now walked hand in hand as they moved to seize and control the most profitable trade routes that fed the empire's wealth. At the same time, they worked to harden their frontiers, fortifying borders and extending influence into the contested regions. But above all, the northern boundary of British India had to be stabilized, not merely for defenses, but to ensure that no rival power could emerge from the mountains or beyond to challenge British authority. The Himalayas represented both a geographical shield and a strategic frontier. And with the expanding Gurkha state now occupying lands the British considered essential buffer zones, tensions between the two powers grew steadily, even before a single shot was fired. The core issue was simple. Nepal and the British did not agree on where the border was. No reliable maps existed, and there were no mutually recognized boundary markers or formal treaties defining the territory. As Nepal's borders pressed outwards, its reach extended into the Batwal and Sioraj along the Gorakhpur frontier and deep into the belt of Terai. Farther west, the kingdom asserted control over Kumaon and Garhwal, tying distant hill territories more tightly to Kathmandu's authority. To the British, many of these lands lay within their rightful sphere of influence, territories they believed were already under their shadows. But to Nepal, the matter was far simpler. These were lands won, governed, and defended by Gurkha hands. Between these two convictions, each held with equal certainty, conflict was slowly and quietly taking root. With tensions spreading across the disputed regions and whispers of war echoing through the hills, it resulted in local disputes becoming violent. Tax collectors were arrested, villages were claimed by both sides, and officials complained of raids, patrols, and harassment. However, neither power would retreat, because retreat meant weakness. This was the slow and inevitable drift towards war. In early 1814, a violent confrontation occurred near Batwal, a strategically important frontier claimed by both sides. British-appointed policemen were killed in a clash with Nepalese forces, and for the British government in Calcutta, the incident provided the justification it had been waiting for. For Governor-General Lord Hastings, the conclusion had become unavoidable. Diplomacy had run its course, and Nepal showed no intention of surrendering the disputed lands along the frontier. In Hastings' view, now only the application of military force could bring a permanent settlement to the border, and on the 1st of November 1814, Hastings issued formal orders to his generals. The British East India Company would go to war with Nepal. However, this declaration did not mark a sudden beginning. In truth, the conflict had been unfolding for years, shaped by expanding borders, clashing ambitions, and a frontier where compromise had long since failed. Lord Hastings' strategy was straightforward. Nepal would be struck on multiple fronts all at once. Its armies would be broken, and it would be forced to accept a formal border. 4 main columns were assigned to carry out this plan. The first was a western column led by General Rollo Gillespie, later replaced by General Gabriel Martindale. This column was tasked with the primary attack at Nalapani before advancing into the western Garhwal region. The second of the western columns was commanded by Major General David Ocholoni. His objectives were clear: neutralize the Gurkhali military power in the west, secure trade routes, and defeat Amar Singh Thapa. This would become the decisive theatre of the war. The third column, under Major General John Sullivan Wood, would advance through the central frontier near Batwal. And the fourth column, led by General Bennett Marley. He was assigned to secure the eastern front near the Makwan Por in the later phases of the campaign. Altogether, the East India Company mobilized over 20,000 troops. These included sepoy battalions, artillery batteries, sappers, and engineers. It was one of the largest campaigns the company had ever mounted in and around the Himalayas. Nepal's response was immediate, and the kingdom mobilized its frontier commanders. Amar Singh Thapa, also known as Bada Kaji, regarded as one of Nepal's greatest military commanders, and as the overall commander of the western sector, he directed the Gurkhali defense stretching from the Sutlej River to Garhwal and Kumaon during the war. Ranjor Singh Thapa, son of Amar Singh Thapa, was also one of the Gurkha's most important field commanders. He first gained prominence by building and commanding the fortified Jaitak Ridge and overseeing the Seymour-Nahan sector, strategically vital ground. Other commanders included the likes of Hasti Dal Shah, overseeing Almora, Bhakti Thapa at Malun, and a notable young captain, Balbhadra Kunwar, who led the small hill fort of Nalapani. Nepal knew it was outnumbered. Its weapons were outdated, its logistics limited, and its terrain harsh. However, Nepal's commanders also believed that loyalty, mastery of the terrain, and courage could slow and perhaps even stop a much larger enemy. By October 1814, British forces began assembling at the foothills. Supply lines stretched behind them, engineers marked paths, and commanders issued their final orders. To the British, the campaign seemed manageable. With their expansive trade routes through northern India, they were confident. To the Gurkhas, it was a test of will. On the 31st of October, the British column under General Gillespie advanced towards a small stone fortress overlooking Dehradun. Inside that fort stood a young officer, Balbhadra Kunwar, who was given command of fewer than 600 men. The British brought more than 3,000. The first battle of the war, and the beginning of the Gurkha legend, was about to begin.